Hola, hola, amigas. Welcome to another episode of Modern Latina in Midlife. In this episode, I'm talking about why I love podcasting as a medium so much. By the end of this episode, you will know why podcasting is a powerful way to reach your audience, the number one thing keeping people stuck from starting a podcast, and how to get past that roadblock. So, if you or someone you know might be interested in starting a podcast, reaching a larger audience, sharing your story or your message with the world, this one is specifically for you. But before I get started, today's 11/11. At the time of the recording of this episode, it is 11/11, and I plan to release this episode in the next couple of days. And I don't know about you, but I have just been feeling this kind of heavy energy. It's not heavy like negative, but just really out of sorts. I didn't want to get out of bed this morning, was feeling really lazy, and in meeting with different people throughout the day, friends that we got together to channel for each other, even like the people that I work with, my team, who were all under like the same spell, if you will, just feeling really tired and feeling this kind of heaviness. It's almost like we're changing frequencies or something. But anyways, so happy 11/11. Now, most of you might know that aside from providing holistic business coaching services, being an intuitive and energy healer, that I am also a podcast producer. I've been producing podcasts for my clients since 2015. It all started when I was just starting off as a part-time virtual assistant. A client I was working with asked me to help her launch her podcast. And I didn't even know what a podcast was at the time. But I jumped in at the opportunity and immediately fell in love with the medium. I've been hooked on podcasts ever since. And I've been helping my clients launch and produce their podcasts ever since. This year, 2025, marks exactly 10 years since I've been producing podcasts. Now, I'm going to start by sharing why I love podcasting and why I think it's such a powerful medium to share your message. I believe that just like everyone has a book in them, everyone has a podcast in them. You have experience to share, wisdom to share, your hero story, something you have overcome that you can help others through. You have gifts, skills, your own medicine that you came to this lifetime to share with the rest of us. I not only encourage you to share that with others, it is actually your responsibility to share that with others. That is what your purpose in this lifetime is. So you have a message that needs to be heard, and your ideal audience is waiting to receive your soul message and your medicine. If this is something that is in your heart, it's a desire that you've had. If it's been ruminating in your head for a while, this is meant for you. And that's what I am here to do, is to empower people, especially women. I'm here to empower you, especially. Listen to this in this very moment, to share your voice, to heal and open up your throat chakra, to make yourself heard and visible, to share your message, your story, your inspiration with people. This is my mission. And that is why my business name is Blue Chakra Studio, to help you open up that throat chakra, the blue chakra. I help you share your medicine with the world, whether that is with starting a business, scaling a business, getting clear on your messaging, or starting and growing a podcast. You would be surprised how many people you will inspire and empower with your message. So here's why podcasting is the perfect medium to share your voice and your soul message. Number one, in 2024, 60% of the population 12 and above had listened to a podcast, and roughly 80% were familiar with the medium. Number two, each week, more Americans listen to podcasts than have Netflix accounts. Take that in. Number three, 30% of Americans are weekly podcast listeners and listen to roughly 11 episodes per week. Number four, it's a fairly low cost of entry. One of the most expensive things that you're going to pay for is probably your podcast hosting platform. If you choose to go with a paid one, I prefer a paid one. I prefer Libsyn, and it starts at $5 a month, or it could go up to $20 depending on how much storage you use every month. And then there is a platform that is letting you podcast for free, which I can definitely share with you and other podcasts that are available out there, or other podcast platforms, I should say, that are available out there. The other expense you might have, so that's $20 a month. Let's just say on the high end, it's $20. It's 5 to 20. The other expense you might have, if you choose to, is to spend money on a microphone. And those can range anywhere from $20 to $500. So pick your price point of what you want to spend. I do highly recommend a mic at a bare minimum. You'll notice a difference. But really, other than that, that's really it. You can edit your own episodes. That's fairly simple. Everybody, just about every computer has some sort of podcast editing software, or it can be purchased pretty economically. You can really do this on a low budget. So I've been producing podcasts for over 10 years now, but there's one common theme that I see come up that prevents people from starting a podcast. People get stuck on the foundational pieces. And when they get stuck on the foundational pieces, they don't have the confidence to go out there and to do it and to put themselves out there. Once they get clear on those foundational pieces, then they usually tend to be off and running and have successful podcasts. But they can't seem to get those first few pieces squared away without a bit of a struggle. If they don't get those pieces squared away, then they tend to pass on the podcast idea over and over again for months, if not even years. I know that because that happened to me as well. So with what I'm sharing with you today, you're going to gain the confidence you desire to finally start your podcast and stop second guessing yourself on your podcast topic and episodes in 3 simple steps. In step 1, you need to clarify your podcast message, your niche, to get clear on your topic so you never run out of things to talk about, and set yourself up as a high-level expert to become the go-to resource in your field. Step 2, define your ideal audience. Define your ideal audience so you know who you are talking to. Align your topics to their preferences and have them excitedly waiting to hear your next episode. And step 3, name your podcast. Choose a clear and concise podcast name using practical guidelines so your ideal listener can easily find you. So let's go ahead and get started with step 1. Clarify your podcast message or your niche. Now, there is a workbook attached to the show notes if you're interested in downloading it, or you can go to bluechakrastudio.com/podcast power hour. So you can also download that and use it after you listen to this episode to go deeper. The workbook is actually part of a masterclass, you'll notice, I called the Podcast Power Hour, that takes you deep into these 3 steps to set up the foundation of your podcast. So when you go to download this workbook, it'll include the masterclass video and the workbook, but you can just use the workbook if that's all you need after listening to this episode. So in step 1, you're going to clarify your podcast message, which is also called your niche. Why is that important? Well, let's start with number 1. Your target audience will come from this. A niche podcast allows you to hone in on the specific target audience, your persona, the person that you are speaking to. These listeners are likely to be highly engaged because they share the same specific interests. This makes it easier to grow your podcast audience because you know exactly who you're catering to and can tailor content to their preferences. 2, the competition. The podcasting space is still growing. It's 2025 and it's still growing. While I think it is far from being saturated, this is definitely a medium that continues to gain more attention. That's why so many celebrities are getting into the podcasting world. By choosing a specific niche, you're reducing the number of direct competitors, which can make it easier for your podcast to stand out and be noticed. However, in my personal opinion, I believe that there's room for everyone and that competition should never keep you from pursuing what you are passionate about because what you bring to the table is you, your personality, your expertise, and your energy. Which leads me to number 3, expertise. When you focus on a specific niche, it allows you to dive deeper into a topic and develop a high level of expertise. This can make your podcast a go-to resource for listeners interested in your chosen field. Number 4, monetization opportunities for advertisers and sponsors. Advertisers who want to reach a specific target audience may be more likely to sponsor niche podcasts. A clearly defined audience can be appealing to businesses selling products or services that align with your podcast topic. 5, community building. Focusing on a niche can also enable you to build a stronger, more active community around your podcast topic. Listeners are more likely to engage with your content and with each other when they share this common interests. 6, consistency. A niche provides a clear framework for your podcast episodes, leading to consistent output. Consistency is the key to retaining your audience and attracting new listeners. I can tell you from experience that when you are not consistent, when you drop off for several months, it will affect your podcast downloads. It will affect your subscribers. I've seen it happen time and time again. And it's not as easy to get them back once you've already lost them. You almost are starting from scratch all over again. So it's always a good idea to be very clear on what your message is and who your target audience is so that you can also remain very active in the topics and the messaging that you are delivering. So you might be asking, how do you clarify your message? I first like to take people through practical exercises. Identify your interests and expertise. Now, you may already have a very clear idea of what you want to talk about. That's amazing. Or if you're like me, you have a ton of ideas and can't quite narrow it down. So I always like to take people to start by making a list of topics that you're passionate about or have expert knowledge in, or what people come to you for all the time, what they ask you for advice for. And start by making a list of those things. There's a place in the workbook where you can do that or jot that down on a regular notebook or journal. Number 2, do a little market research. Go out and take a look at what's out there around the topics that you're interested in. See what they're talking about. What are their main content or topic pillars? Maybe even take a look at your favorite podcasts and what is it about them that interests you, and start to narrow down based on what sparks your joy and what you see is missing. This is not to copy them, but to spark ideas based on what you're enjoying and what you're not. It's simply data. It's gathering data. Notice what makes your heart open up, what makes you feel excited, and start to pay attention to that. What is that? It's an indication of what you're passionate about. So start narrowing it down from there. Number 3, narrow down the niche. After gathering your data with your list and your market research, you can start to narrow down the niche. The more specific you can get, the better. For example, instead of general fitness podcasts, you might decide to focus on business tips for busy parents or fitness routines that could be done at home. I would suggest that you pick your top 3 pillars of content. So this could be, for example, for me, my podcast is Modern Latina in Midlife, and I like to talk about business because that is very near and dear to my heart. I love running businesses. I help women run businesses, so I love to talk about that. I am the modern Latina in midlife myself. So I'm going to talk about things happening in my life, in a woman's life, at this stage of midlife that's becoming an empty nester. We're talking about perimenopause and menopause, what's happening to our bodies, all the symptoms. that we're experiencing. And I love to talk about healing, personal work, healing modalities, holistic ceremonies and rituals, energy and frequency, spiritual awakenings. You get the gist. So, those are my three topic pillars that I love to talk about. So, yes, there's business. While it can potentially bring in clients sometimes, I also love sharing about myself. This also allows the listener to get to know who I am so that you don't have to stick specifically to just say fitness if you have other interests. There's other interests that you have, like gardening. You can talk about that, or cooking. You can talk about that. And they all become interrelated anyways. And it gets your audience to get to know you specifically, to get in your energy field. And that's how you're going to make it different from everybody else out there. There are a couple of other tips in the workbook to guide you through this whole process if you want to take a look at that. But these are the main this is where I like to start people off at. And honestly, most of the time, people kind of already have an idea of the general topics that they want to talk about. And as a reminder, you can always pivot. This is your baby. Nothing is written in stone and nothing is permanent. You can always and very easily switch and change it up as you grow as well. Always keep that in mind, and you can refine even after you launch. You can refine and pivot, and you're going to start to become clear as you are podcasting, as you have people listening and giving you their feedback. You're going to continue to narrow down, refine, and pivot. It's a constant pivoting machine, to be completely honest with you. Same with if you're running a business, you understand this. You always have to pivot and change with the times. And the reality is that our businesses, the things that we produce, like our podcast and our content and our offers, they pivot and change as we pivot and grow as well. Now, if you're really having a hard time picking a topic, I'm just going to tell you what I tell my clients when they're struggling to pick a business to start. Just pick one. Pick one thing and get it out there. Because the last thing you want to do is be sitting on this idea a year from today and still not having started a podcast, still ruminating and thinking about it. If it's in your heart, it's meant for you. You can always refine and pivot it later. Okay, so now we're going to go to step 2. This is where you're going to define your ideal audience, your ideal listener. Why is this important? Because defining your audience will help you tailor your podcast to their preferences so you can earn their trust, making it more likely to be successful. For many of us, a topic we want to podcast about is something that we're interested in. It's talking to somebody that we once were. It's a firmer version of ourselves, or maybe it's us today. Some things that we could be our own avatar is what I'm trying to say. For many of us, a topic that we want to podcast about is something that we are interested in ourselves or something related to our business, which usually means that you as a host are or once were your target audience. That's the case for me. I'm talking about the things that I'm interested in as a modern Latina in midlife. And I'm inviting people on this journey with me. And the people that follow me and listen to my podcast are people like me. And so I have people that are interested in the topics of, like, say, energy healing and personal development. But I also have people that are following me because they're interested in business and podcasting. So one of my avatars, one of my ideal audience listeners is me, it's myself. You will see in the note in the workbook that there is on page 6, there's an exercise that will help you get clear on who your audience listener is. You can start to identify them as one single person. It's going to take you through all these like exercises of all these things to ask yourself and answer about who this person is. But you're going to start to identify who this one single person is so that when you're podcasting, you're speaking to this one single person. So right now, I'm listening. I'm not listening. I am speaking to you. You right there in your earbuds as you're walking, as you're shopping through Target, preparing your cafecito, I'm speaking to you. And that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Get specific as to who that person is, who you're speaking to. You can get you can make somebody up basically. Create a name for them. Um, create a, maybe her name is Paula. You're going to make that up. Identify that listener as, okay, I'm going to record this episode today, and this is for Paula. How old is she? Rather than saying she's anywhere between 35 to 55, identify she's a 53-year-old woman and she has two grown sons who have already left the nest. One of them left recently, so she's an empty nester and she works from home and she's a coach. And so you start to identify them that way. Now, if you are your ideal audience or somebody like you is your ideal audience, then you can simply make that person you or a former version of yourself. Maybe if you're 50, maybe you're speaking to 40-year-old you. So make that the avatar. Maybe they're an entrepreneur. Maybe they're focused on fitness or coaching. What are all the details of their life? Their relationship status? Are they single? Are they married? Are they divorced? Do they have kids? And how old are they? Are they little toddlers or are they in college or have they moved out? Because some of the topics you cover will depend greatly on what stage of life this listener is in. It's going to make a difference on how you speak to that audience. You can even get as detailed as to where they live, in the city, in the country, in a cold climate, in warm climate. Do they commute to work? Do they work virtually or in an office? What does a typical week look like for them? How do they enjoy their free time? Where do they like to shop? Try to get as specific as possible as to what stores. Maybe it's Target and Trader Joe's. What's their favorite pastime? What is their least favorite thing to do? What does their weekend look like? Do they spend their weekends at soccer practices and tournaments, or do they have free time and like to go visit new activities around town? When you start to get clear on these things, then you know how to speak to that one person. When you're creating your podcast episodes, then you create your script so that you can talk to that one person. You imagine that one person sitting in front of you as you're recording your episodes. So, what I've offered in the workbook attached is a script in the form of a Mad Lib where you could fill in the blanks. This is a script that will remind you of who your ideal audience is and who you're speaking to. You keep it handy when you're creating your content, when you're looking at the topics that you're going to talk about or your content pillars. Um, so that you can always keep an eye on that list, on that script. If you have a list of topic episodes that you're going to talk about, keep that handy. Keep it maybe at the top of that particular list so that you're always referring back to it. It helps you speak to them like, hey, while you're on your Target run, here's an episode that you can listen to, or you might be able to listen to this on your carpool ride, your 10-minute carpool ride to drop off the kids. So, and you can also tailor the length of your episodes to who this person is. If it's a mom with young toddlers, you might have to have smaller episodes that they can consume in like doctor waiting rooms or on a carpool trip or, very quick little moments of silence of time that they have to themselves. You can make reference to the things that they are likely to be doing, like gardening or reading a book or drinking coffee or whatever it is, that you can make references to them that they can relate to and identify themselves with. Now, here's a technique that will help you identify your audience if you haven't gotten clear on that yet. Start by your message or your niche. Start by analyzing that message. Your target, your three topic pillars. Analyze what those are and start to get clear on who might be interested in those topics. Now, like I said, you might be the ideal listener yourself, somebody just like you. So you can even put that down and you can write that on the script that I've shared in the workbook. Like my ideal client could be me, Sonia. She's 50 years old, has two sons. Um, that's who I was a few years ago, and that's who my avatar was at the time. In fact, that's still who my avatar is today, that 50-year-old woman. So these are things of relevance. You can also have two or three avatars, ideal. And when I say avatars, I'm referring to the ideal audience, the target audience, the avatar, the persona, those your target niche, those are all the names for the same thing. This is for the person, the ideal audience, the ideal person that's going to be listening to your episode. But you could have more than one. One of my listeners, which I was very surprised about, is 35-year-old women, 35-year-old women who are not married, who maybe are living with their partners, but not married, don't have children. And y- she lives with a significant other. They like to travel. They have plenty of free time on their hands. And I have no idea this person would be listening to me. But that's what I have found. So then you can add that, as another listener and shift and refine as you start to podcast and receive feedback from your listeners and you start to see, okay, who is this listener? If they start to follow you, your social, on social media, you can go take a look at who that listener is to gain an idea of what their life is like. Another tip to help you get specific on who your ideal audience is to analyze existing podcasts. Look at podcasts in your chosen niche and analyze their audience. Check out their listener reviews, their social media engagement, their website content to get an understanding of who that audience might be. Now, keep in mind that you adding your second and third content pillars, your additional content pillars, that's what's going to make yours different, but at least it starts to give you an idea of where you can start. It's a starting point. It could be a similar audience, and it can just help you to start to identify who your listener is. Do a little market research. I don't like to call it cyber stalking, but get in there and take a look at who are these listeners? What is their life like? What are they talking about? And then just start to gain some understanding. This is just feedback. Okay. A third option is to do a survey to get some feedback. If you have a pre-existing audience from, like, say, a blog, for instance, survey them. Survey them or your social media following. Survey to understand their interests and preferences better. This might be a good way to do a poll on Instagram, for example. People love that. You can ask your friends and family. So run a little survey, do a little poll. Also, another way to gain an understanding is to check online communities. Look at communities, forums, social media groups related to your niche. Facebook groups are a great way, groups that are specific to your niche. Go in and see what they're talking about. What are they talking about? What are they struggling with? What are they complaining? What are they asking? This will give you an understanding of who they are, what their life is like, but also content ideas. The things that they're telling people they're struggling with, their challenges, what their wins are, what they're enjoying, what they want, their questions, all of that is potential episode topics. Now, this is a hypothetical listener. If you are in the very beginning stages, this is all just somebody we're making up so that we can pretend that we are looking at them and talking to them when we're recording a podcast episode. So you can just make this up literally to just get started. Just create a fictional person that you might be speaking to. Once you start podcasting, start to keep an eye on who is engaging with your podcast on social media. And remember that identifying your target audience is not a one-time task. This is an ongoing process as your audience might change and evolve over time as you gain a further understanding of who this audience is and you learn more about them. It's going to change, it's going to evolve, you're going to grow, and so will your audience. Like I mentioned, I had no idea when I started that I was going to be attracting, 35-year-old women. And so now, if we think about it, midlife does start somewhere around 35 to 40. That was just kind of a surprise to me. I just didn't think that they'd wanna be listening to me. Maybe they're interested in what's to come in the next 10 years for them, and that's what attracts them. I don't know. I'm still gaining an understanding. I know that 35-year-old women are coming into my business for help. So maybe that's why. Maybe they see me as somebody who's a little bit wiser, who's already been in business for 10 years for myself. And so now they're seeking guidance from me. All right. So let's move on to step number three, which is naming your podcast. For some, naming their podcast is one of the first things they come up with. For others, it's the hardest part. Either way, here are some guidelines for picking a great podcast name. I'm going to ask that you brainstorm, take a brainstorm of all possible names, write down all the words, phrases, ideas, keywords that come to mind, even if they sound silly. You can Google keywords for your niche and your message, for your content pillars. Write down all the ideas that come around. Just start brainstorming. Just do a brain dump and start to see which words sound good together. Write down different iterations of them. A great tool to use here to get you started is to use ChatGPT. Throwing your niche and your ideal audience in there. Tell ChatGPT what your podcast is about and have them come up with names, come up with ideas for you. It's a great starting point. Do a brain dump of everything that comes to mind, and there's space in the workbook for that if you want to use that. But or in a regular journal, but it's a great starting point. And start to circle the ones that sound more interesting to you. Highlight them or star them or whatever you need to do. I suggest that you aim for 4 words or less. The shorter it is, the easier it is to remember. And also, the easier it is to make it into a thumbnail for your cover art. Now, think about how small that thumbnail looks on your phone when you're scrolling through. So, the bigger you can make that name and clearer you can make that name on the thumbnail, the easier it'll be to stand out when they're scrolling, and the easier it'll be for them to find you when they're searching for you. Now, some of the things to avoid is using the words the and podcast in the name. For example, this podcast is Modern Latina in Midlife. So we don't want to use the Modern Latina in Midlife podcast. We don't need the and podcast in there. The less words, the better. So Modern Latina in Midlife, period. Using the and podcast just adds more words, adds more space. Now, if I wanted to call the podcast Sonia Flores, I mean, this is for somebody who has a big name. I wouldn't do it for my name because, well, who am I, right? People don't know me. So, but let's say I was extremely popular. I could call it the Sonia Flores podcast. Then that makes sense. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not incredibly popular. People aren't looking for, oh, Sonia Flores is a podcast, so I'm not going to do that. But if you had a really unique name or something to that effect, right? That where it does make sense and where maybe there's only 2 other words in the mix. So the Sonia Flores podcast, then it might make sense, to use that and podcast with it. But otherwise, I would try to avoid it. I would suggest to avoid special characters, special ways of spelling it, backward letters, purposely misspelled words, abbreviations, um, like etc, for example, instead of etc. Just avoid any of that because it makes it more difficult for people to type it and search it. If there's like an exclamation point or if there are like 3 dots between like 2 words, it just makes it more difficult to search them and for people to find them because maybe different podcasts come up or maybe it just doesn't come up. So I would avoid doing any of that altogether. Now, a lot of people ask, what if my podcast name is taken? Okay. Podcast names are very much like book names. There can be multiple books and multiple podcasts with the same name. So that's okay. What I would be more concerned about is checking to make sure that that name is not trademarked. So it might have, if it's trademark, it might have a little trademark symbol next to it. But if it doesn't, then I would search it. I would search for it on the internet, search for it on podcast directories. I would also run a trademark search at uspto.gov/trademark/search to look for trademarks, just to make sure you're not violating somebody else's trademark. So that might be something important to do. The other thing I would do is if you do intend to one day use it as part of a business, as part of an offer, as part of something else, something bigger, then I would highly suggest that you do take the proper steps to make sure it's not trademarked and that you potentially trademark it for yourself if you think that this is going to be something big that you want to do and use for other purposes as well. So that's a tip that I'd like to give people. Another thing you can do is get some outside opinions. Once you've narrowed down the names, put it out there, share it with your friends and family to see what people like. What do they gravitate towards? Put it on social media as well. Run a poll on social media. Instagram loves polls. So put it on there. It's always a fun thing to get your audience, your listeners, your friends to bring them along on the journey. Help them name it, help you name it, help you pick the colors for your episode, for your artwork, help you pick the right thumbnail for your podcast. People love to do that, and you actually can gain a lot of great knowledge from that. You can also just throw it out there. Just say, I'm starting a podcast and I'm going to talk about this. Help me pick some names. I mean, maybe somebody out there might just give you a name that's super cool and that you love. And then once you pick one or two or three, start saying them out loud. How do they roll off your tongue? Is it easy to say it when you're saying, welcome to another episode of Modern Latina in Midlife? Does it roll off your tongue easily or is it a tongue twister? So you're going to be saying this a lot and sharing it with people, saying it on your podcast, advertising it, hopefully. So make sure it's something you can say easily also, and that's easy for people to say. Well, now I'm going to invite you to do some visioning, a little visioning exercise. If you are able to, I invite you to close your eyes if you can and envision this. Envision the feeling of you showing up with confidence, consistently delivering your message, sharing your passion and your medicine with the world, feeling fulfilled and reaching your ideal audience, making a deep connection. And your ideal audience is excitedly waiting for your next podcast episode to drop. Imagine inspiring them, making a difference, creating positive impact in the world. Imagine connecting and collaborating with others, opportunities you never thought were possible. And envision this being a reality in the next 30 days, 60 days, maybe a year. Because that's what I inspire people to do. You know, your message can heal, help, or inspire someone. So don't sit on that podcast if there's even a tug or a whisper of an interest. It's meant for you, believe it. And it's very possible. You can do this. So again, there's a workbook in the show notes, in the link, or you can go to bluechakrastudio.com/podcast power hour. It is attached to a masterclass that takes you through these exercises step by step and goes a little bit deeper, but you're more than welcome to watch the masterclass. It's completely free, or just download the workbook and use it as a guide to help you. Thank you again for being here today. I do have one ask. Share this episode with that one person you know needs to start their own podcast. And okay, I have a second ask. So subscribe to the podcast so you're always notified of new episodes. I'm trying to grow this podcast, so that's just a little thing you can do to help me grow it. Share it and subscribe. Now, share with me what other topics you want to learn about. And if you have any questions about today's topic, you can email me at sonia@soniasdesk.com or find me on Instagram at Blue Chakra Studio. Hasta la próxima, amigas.